the buildup of gold in the Russian central bank, and what the reason for that was, whether they're being able to utilize it in this situation. It certainly doesn't seem to have protected the ruble in the short term when those sanctions came in. Just give us your thoughts on what the reasoning behind that buildup was there with the gold reserves.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wrote about this in my first book, Currency Wars, which came out in 2011. So that book is 10 years old at this point. But pick it up. The first two chapters were about the first ever financial war game, where I was one of the war game planners and facilitators. And then I participated in the war game, and then I wrote about it in the book. And I was on the China team. I had a friend I recruited for the Russia team. We went out to dinner and we cooked up this plan on our own and was like, aren't you cheating on the game? I said, no, this is war. There's no cheating. It's a war. But what we said was that in our separate embassies, we had these breakout rooms. So the China team would go to a room that was like our embassy or whatever. And the other teams did likewise. But I was going to try to sell my Chinese teammates on the idea that China would buy as much gold as possible, turn its back on the dollar, or insist that any Chinese exports had to be paid for in gold. And then my friend was going to try to do the same thing on the Russia side, and we're going to try to run the dollar off the road. Now, this is a little far-fetched at the time, but that's the whole idea of a war game, is to get the Pentagon thinking, at least 5 years ahead or longer. I don't want to ruin the ending, but the whole thing is in my book. But the point is, at the time we did this, we got laughed at. There were Harvard professors like, you guys are crazy, you're foolish. Why are you talking about gold? Gold's not part of the monetary system. At that time, Russia had 600 tons. Today, they have 2,300 tons. In other words, exactly the course of conduct that we warned the Pentagon about, in that case, 12 years ago, has played out. And they're doing it intentionally because they're trying to get away from the dollar. Now, it's hard to get away from the dollar. The dollar is too big. It's 60% of global reserves, 80% of most payments, 100% of energy payments. You don't just get up under the dollar just like that. But the Treasury's actions, and again, Greg, you referred earlier to unintended consequences, and I've explained this to the Treasury and got nowhere, but at least I tried. I said, look, you guys are overusing these financial sanctions. You think they're very powerful. They actually are very powerful. And that's the point. If they're that powerful and you use them that frequently, everyone's going to look for a way out of the dollar. They're like, hey, why am I setting myself? I trusted you guys. I got all these dollars. But you're telling me I can't spend them. I can't use them. I can't transfer them. I'm out of the SWIFT system. I'm out of my account's frozen. Well, then screw it. I'll just go somewhere else. And there are other places to go. Gold is a good one. Not the only one, but the fact that 21% of Russia's reserves are in gold, the fact that, by the way, it's physical bullion, they're not buying ETFs.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
It's stored in Russia. They're not foolish enough to leave it at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And Russia is a major gold producer. It produces a little under 400 tons per year just in Russia. It's one of the 4 or 5 largest producers, Australia, Canada, U.S., and China. Means that to that extent, it's insulated from exposure to the dollar. Now, you may have to get creative at this point because the West can't seize the gold unless they want to invade Moscow. But they've said, well, yeah, if you sell the gold for dollars, we're going to freeze the dollars. Okay. Well, you can use it as collateral for loans. You can do a kind of barter. You can say to China, hey, send us, the latest technology, and we'll pay you in gold. We'll just put it on a pallet, fly it over to China, unload it in Beijing. So there are things you can do with it, but they don't have to do anything with it. Just having it inspires confidence that they might not otherwise have. As far as the ruble, yeah, the ruble collapsed, but 50%, I think in dollar terms, maybe a little bit less. But I always say Elvira Nabiullina, who's the head of the Central Bank of Russia, is the only central banker in the world who knows her job. She raised interest rates to 20%. Well, at some point they will be like, hey, okay, I'll stay in rubles because maybe they're devaluing, but 20% interest, I'll take it. And so again, she knows what she's doing. There are plenty of workarounds in the SWIFT system. I'm kind of an expert on SWIFT because I did so much in counterterrorism and the Iran was de-SWIFted in 2012. last major country prior to Russia. I was very involved with that, but I know how it works, but I also know the workarounds. And there are ways to do that. So Russia's going to be able to, they're not prohibited from receiving dollars for oil and natural gas. The oil and natural gas are still flowing. They've got the gold. You got to invade Moscow if you want to get it. And that's not going to happen. And there are plenty of workarounds with SWIFT. So, life will go on. It'll be inconvenient.